great to be here, isn't it? And to have this celebration. We're glad you made it, Larry. And Tabitha and those young'uns. You know, I grew up in Terry County up on the South Plains of Texas, and it happened to be the town I was born in. Brownfield was the county seat. And I got to thinking about that when we were getting all kind of psyched up for the celebration of the courthouse anniversary here. And I think any town that has a courthouse and a courthouse square is very fortunate, because not only is the courthouse the place where the county does its business, but the courthouse square is where the communities gather to observe or to celebrate events just like this one. And of course, the event I remember most, because I marked my calendar every year, the first Saturday in November, I would be in George West. And Storyfest is one of my all-time favorites of festivals of any sort, but certainly storytelling festivals. And like Marianne, I remember all the Red Wagon Parade, and there was a 5K run at one point, and the car show and the band. I love the band as well. And all of those vendors of food and crafts. And I still have a couple of puppets that I bought from one of the craft people. I've never used them. I just thought they were cute. Took them home and hung them up. And the hospitality of the townspeople here, amazing. And the hard work and dedication of the directors and the volunteers. Just amazing memories. And I, too, have a few particular memories. I remember by the time I started coming, we got more civilized. We had tents. And I remember one year, you never knew about the weather. You know, you kept checking up to that weekend, but you never knew it's Texas. So one year, it rained. Well, we don't ever complain about the rain in Texas, so the show went on. And we did have the tents. And so there was a tent set up on the lawn in front of the courthouse. And all of us rushed into that tent, not only because we wanted to hear the stories, but we were, seeking some shelter from the rain. Well, we looked up at one point, and we noticed that the roof of the tent was beginning to sag as the water accumulated on the top of the tent. I was sitting toward the middle, kind of right under where the most prominent sag was. But then I saw somebody, no doubt intending to avert disaster, come up with the idea of getting some sort of long-handled, I don't know whether it was a broom or a rake or what it was, but the idea was that he or she, I don't remember, I'm sure it was a volunteer, always ready, began to try to push the water down and off of the roof of the tent. And it worked. The only problem being that as it got to the edge, it cascaded off of the roof. It looked like a miniature Niagara Falls, so that the people sitting on the outside, if they didn't get totally drenched, they at least got significantly splashed. But whoever it was, I've been trying to remember, it may have been Diane de las Casas, I think maybe, was on stage, and she didn't miss a beat. Because we all know that at Storyfest, the show must go on. And it did. And then along came the Liars Contest. Now, it was 2005. I double-checked with Mary Margaret. when I got a call from Becky Allen. Now, I had started my career as a liar in Austin, the politicians notwithstanding. And so she called me and she said, "Is there a state liars contest?" I said, "Not that I know of." And she said, "Well, there is now." So George West not only became early on the storytelling capital of Texas, it now was the site of the Texas Liars Contest. And we were checking last night to see, I knew that DC and I and Dennis had sort of a running, friendly kind of competition. No, except DC says it's nothing friendly about it, but I thought DC and I were tied at 4, but I'm wrong. And he's one up on me. It's 5-4. So I don't know, we got to have a tell-off one of these days, DC. What? No, yeah, the counting. Who's going to do the counting? So I thought I'd share with you the story that the very first deliberate, original lie that I told at the Liars Contest. It's a story about my daddy, who had a little farm out south of Brownfield, because he liked to grow things. He did. He had livestock. He had cattle, he had horses, he had goats, he had bird dogs, he had chickens, he had guinea fowl, you name it, he'd try it. But it's a farm, right? So he also had crops. Well, he planted cotton out on the back 40. He planted alfalfa down in the draw. And every year, my daddy had a great big garden. Now, up by the house, he would plant tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers. But out in the field, he would plant quarter-mile rows of field corn, black-eyed peas, string beans. That was in the spring. In the fall, he planted turnips. And every year, he would get his picture in the Brownfield News and the Terry County Herald holding the longest cucumber, the biggest turnip. And then one year in the spring, he decided he was going to plant watermelons in between the corn rows. And not just any watermelons either. No, sir, he was going to plant black diamond watermelons. Now, I see one or two of you are nodding. You know about black diamonds. The rest of you may not know that the black diamonds are not your long, skinny, stripedy kind of watermelons, and they're certainly not those little personal-sized watermelons you can get these days at the H-E-B. No. They are those great, big, rounded, dark green watermelons. Ruby red on the inside, big-hearted watermelons. Ooh, they are good. Well, now, your black diamonds grow big anyway, but this one particular melon got to growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger till pretty soon it was pushing out beyond the corn rows. It uprooted about a quarter acre or so. Well, it got too big for Daddy to load in the back of the pickup, take it in town, and get his picture made with it. So he just called the editor of the newspaper and he said, "You're going to have to come out here this year, fellas. I've got something you got to see." And they did. So there stood my daddy with his hand up on that watermelon. Oh, yeah, it was way bigger than he was, and my daddy was 5'9" with his boots off. Well, then my stepmother got to thinking about what it was she wanted to take to the county fair that year in the way of canned goods. She didn't enter the baked goods, but she did love to can. Her corn relish had won the blue ribbon just the year before. And she got to thinking about those watermelons, and she had a real good recipe for watermelon preserves. So she decided to go up to the field, look over the crop. Well, naturally, her eye fell on that great big melon that Daddy had his picture made with. But she said to herself, she said, "I wonder if that melon is any good. I reckon I better plug it and find out." Now, she had an 8-inch butcher knife with her. So she walked over that melon. She started cutting out one of those triangle-shaped plugs. But I'm telling you now, the rind on that melon was so thick that when she pulled that plug out, well, it was all rind. There wasn't any watermelon meat on it. So she put her hand in through that plug hole, clear up to her shoulder, and still all she could feel was just rind. Well, that provoked her some. So she took that 8-inch butcher knife, and she started whacking away at that plug hole, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until pretty soon it was big enough she could step inside, aiming to get to the heart of that watermelon. Well, I think everything would have been all right if there hadn't been just a little slope to that field. But there already being some strain on that watermelon vine, what with that big old melon on it, when my stepmother added her weight to it, it was just too much for that little old stem, and it just popped right off, and the next thing she knew, she was just rolling head over heels, over head, inside the watermelon. Well, that melon rolled on down out of that cornfield, took out, about a mile of fence post, and rolled on through the gate and bounced on over onto the county road. And so now she's on her way to town. Well, Daddy was outside when he looked up, and he saw this melon rolling down the road. And then he could hear his wife's voice coming from inside. She was hollering, "The heart! The heart!" And he thought she was having a heart attack. So he jumped into the pickup, pushing the case of cannon jars he'd bought that morning at the Piggly Wiggly over to one side, and got in behind the melon. Well, that county road makes kind of a little bank and turn as it comes into town there, and it just kind of kicked that melon right on over onto Highway 82, and she was on her way to Lubbock by way of Meadow, Ropesville, and Wolfforth. Well, that melon was just rolling down that highway. It was forcing cars and pickups and 18-wheelers off into the bar ditch. It was mowing down mailboxes and Burma shave signs. And Daddy was doing his best to keep up. Meanwhile, in behind him now were falling in police cars and ambulances, fire trucks, and there was even one of those traffic helicopters flying overhead. So all Daddy had to do to keep up to the minute reports was just turn on the radio. The runaway melon is approaching Lubbock at a very high rate of speed. It is headed right toward the South Plains Fairgrounds. They've evacuated the midway, and the exhibit area is on high alert. Well, fortunately for everybody concerned, as the highway goes through Lubbock there, it makes a gentle little curve, and, well, the melon didn't quite negotiate that curve, and it just bounced right on over into McKenzie Park, actually right into the middle of Prairie Dog Town, which, as some of you know, is a noted tourist attraction in Lubbock, Texas. And no animals were hurt in this part of the story. And that melon just started rolling across all those little prairie dog holes, and they must have acted just like hundreds of little speed bumps, because they sure enough did begin to slow that melon down. So that by the time it rolled on over onto the South Plains Fairgrounds, it just rolled up and stopped, just as docile as you please, right in front of the food exhibits building. Well, Daddy came screeching around the corner in the pickup, still thinking his wife was having a heart attack, bailed out, said, "Are you all right, sweet thing? Do you need CPR?" Well, she crawled out of that melon all red in the face and spitting seeds. She said, "No, I'm all right. I just wish I had my cannon jars, because I don't think I'm going to have time now to get my preserves made." Daddy said, "Not to worry, I got a whole case of jars right here in the pickup. All you need to do is scoop out some of the heart of that melon, put it in that jar. You don't even need to add sugar. You know how sweet those black diamonds are. Put a cap on it, you're going to win a blue ribbon for sure." Well, she pulled herself up to her full height and brushed herself off as best she could, did exactly what he said to do, and by doggies, she did win another blue ribbon. And you know, I think that melon would have won a blue ribbon too if it hadn't had so many miles on it. So that was... That was my first winning lie told in George West. Dennis Gaines's name has been mentioned a couple of times. And I guess I want to kind of finish up here by saying the things that all of us, the townspeople, the storytellers, the musicians, everybody who came to Storyfest, the things we treasure most are the friendships. The friends we've made, the friends we've deepened over the years because we've been together, many of us, as many times as we have. And one of the fellows that I had heard of and probably heard tell was Dennis Gaines. He was a big old cowboy. He always entered the cakewalk. And he always won. I guess he just kept entering until he won. And then he would bring the cake to the green room and share it with whoever was in there. And over the years, Dennis and I got to be pretty good friends, and he wrote me a letter years and years ago. And he was a cowboy poet. And I don't know whether DC will verify this or not, but when Dennis would enter the Liars Contests, I wouldn't describe him so much as a teller of tall tales as just a tall talker. Because he could string together one of those classic cowboy boasts for 7.5 minutes and not even take a breath. Amazing. So he sent me, a number of years ago, before his passing, a poem. And I thought maybe we ought to let Dennis have the last word. It's called To a Friend. He wrote it in 1991. My trail is not that of the common herd. My dream is a story untold. A vain quest, perhaps, for a feeling, a word. This friend is my silver and gold. Far from the crush and the maddling throng, my burden I carry alone. Mayhap I shall leave you an undying song, or the rude common words on a stone. The troublesome cares of hearth and home extend not a welcome to me. My tablet, my bed is the range that I roam, and anonymous lands o'er the sea. The creak of the saddle, the roll of the ships, my writings are scribbled in sand. Unknown to me are childish lips or the strength in a good woman's hand. My signposts read always tomorrow, though truly I seek yesterday. But what time is not mortgaged we borrow and pray that we never repay. And yet through the smoke of my wanderings and the arching of memories through years, through 1,000 forgettable ponderings, the triumphs have blotted the tears. For wherever my hoof prints weave and wend to the sun-streaked horizon's rim, I'll remember the warmth and the smile of a friend as the tracks of my passing grow dim. Much obliged.